One of the biggest opportunities in fashion today is to cater to the NRIs who want to buy ethnic Indian wear. And where do all of them go shopping when they visit India? Chandni Chowk. Intrigued by what kind of products they buy and how one can expand an Indian fashion brand internationally, I decided to meet with Lavanya, who is the co-chair of Nalli Sarees, and despite her education at Harvard Business School and a stint at McKinsey, came back to India to start selling sarees to the world.
The olden times, actually, silk sarees were always woven with pure gold zari.
Okay.
And like jewelry, when the family would fall into times of hardship, the women would actually remove the border and take it to a pawn shop. So that you used it just like how you use jewelry.
But you would have to cut it?
You'd have to cut it. And they will melt it down. And so if you see historically, like women really hold on to their Kanjivaram sarees like an heirloom, like an investment.
We sit down at her store in Delhi to understand how does one open stores at international locations, what kind of consumer preferences in colors, styles and fabric exist across regions, how does inventory pricing, margins and operations work, and what makes a 100-year-old brand still so relevant in India and the world. This is Founder's Office with Sarthak Ahuja. I don't know if you've seen that meme online. It pokes fun at all the NRI families outside and what they're wearing at weddings there, because they're like, these are all styles from the 90s which we used to wear when we were kids. And why do these people, despite all their money, not have access to the best designs which we Indians wear in India? And that is a big white space which a lot of businesses today are trying to tap into, saying we want to serve the NRI consumer. Higher price paying capacity, lesser competition. I know you've opened stores internationally. US, Singapore is what I know. So tell me, what all countries?
In the US itself, we have about 5 stores.
Okay.
Canada, Australia, to Singapore, Dubai, London.
Wow.
So we've got, wherever
and multiple
the
stores,
Indian,
so total about 10, 15
yeah,
stores?
there'll be around 10 stores, I think, and all company-owned, company-operated.
Okay.
But every single store of Nalli, and we are 45 plus now, every single store is company-owned, company-operated.
There's no franchise,
we don't do
nothing.
franchises.
And for your international stores, I'm going to dive deeper and ask you about exactly which cities you open on.
In the US, so New Jersey, Chicago, Dallas, Bay Area, what am I missing?
You mean San Francisco?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, in California, Los Angeles, right, and then in Canada and
Canada is Toronto or Vancouver?
Vancouver. And in UAE is Dubai. Singapore. UK is London. And in Australia, we have it in Sydney. We're considering Melbourne.
So, the reason I'm kind of taking the conversation here is because a lot of people, regardless of whether they come from the fashion category or not, they have great Indian products in India. You know, it could be Ayurveda related. It could be anything inherently Indian, supplements, food, sweets, and they're looking to tap into NRIs. What, according to you, is the playbook? Did you at some point see enough online orders or calls coming in from people who've moved there, and that was your hunch or your insight to say, okay, now is the right time for us to go there? Or have there ever been mistakes where you felt you've entered the market a little too early, or you overestimated and you figured maybe some other place gives a better ROI, so that other people don't make that mistake regardless of whether they come from fashion or otherwise?
So interestingly, now we see online sales in the data, and that is a data point. It was my dad who started. The first international expansion was in the 90s in Singapore.
Really?
Yeah. So and in fact, it is him who still drives the international expansions, right? And so it was a little bit serendipitous where my dad said, I've always wanted to, because I feel that the Indian diaspora abroad has that appetite. Now, how do we know? Let's take let's take the US shoppers, Indians who live in the US. They will walk into our stores in December when they're on that break, and they'll say, I wish that you had a store nearby because we're so far, we only make a trip once every 2 years, and especially when they have kids, it becomes a little hard. So we start hearing this, right? Like you start hearing, it's almost like you're doing an ethnography or like a focus group. Now you can do that in a very structured form, but like I said, the power of our store is that the salespeople know everything, right? What they know is not just product and those insights, but also consumer insights. So you keep hearing it and it becomes pattern recognition, right? Like the sales head is hearing that multiple salespeople are sort of telling you, multiple stores are sort of telling you. You realize that, okay, we always see this bump where the NRI customer comes to India around December and they kind of tell us that, I wish that you had this. I would love to buy more. I have need an occasion to wear, but I can't keep making this trip every year. And there is a portion of the consumer who will also feel that, no, I don't want to buy it online. What if, it doesn't come in stock? But obviously there are solutions for that today in 2025. So these are all sort of like the indicators to us that there's demand, right? And it's an unmet demand. So then we do what we've always done. We test the market, right? Basically what we do is, because of our product line, we have to see where the Indian diaspora lives. Where they live is not necessarily also where they shop, right? So we look at a whole bunch of things. So we'll try, so sometimes like you may have Indian grocery stores and Indian retail chains, but that may not be where the high value Indian sort of wants to shop. I want to answer a question also that you asked, to say, have you entered a market and felt, international market, and felt it was too early? Yeah, in London, our first stint was sometime around early 2000s. I think 2002, 2003 we set up. There we made a mistake. We moved to one of the very high-end streets. Of all the things, what we realized was, after we set up store there, customers basically said, listen, the parking cost is too high, right? Like I have to pay for parking. It's just insane. I wish you were elsewhere, right? And so that location actually didn't work out. 10 years hence, or more than that, 15 years hence, we set up our store in the UK again around 2019. This time it did. So we also look at things like, okay, is there enough parking? What is the access point, right? Is it on the wrong side of the street? You have to go make a whole U-turn and get stuck in traffic and things like that. Does that area, is it well connected, right? Is it just like one exit off of the highway, or you really have to like go through some back roads to get there? Is there a natural reason and a pull for consumers to anyway go to that store? Now I'm talking obviously about offline, right? So, but these are all of the things that we kind of figured out.
Okay. But say, would you, from a go-to market perspective, for international, someone who's starting, or when you want to say test a market, if suddenly you feel Netherlands has a lot of Indians, and should we consider opening up in Amsterdam? Would you first do like a shop in shop, go to trunk shows, do something like that? Or when is the right time, or what is the right signal for you to say, I want to take an offline bet here?
Okay, today, see, trunk shows are good. Now, if you happen to have an online business, now that itself is one data point. Even if you don't have an online business that serves that market, honestly, Instagram, social media, you can, I mean, there's a lot of, you'll get inbound requests and queries, like that is the most unfiltered data. But you can also use that as a way to test and ask your customers, hey, where should we go next, right? Now, obviously, the online customer is not necessarily representative. And sometimes when you ask them that, they'll say yes, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to shop there. But it's one data point. Trunk shows is another data point. But see, the kind of traffic and footfalls and conversions that you'll get in a trunk show will not necessarily be what you can expect in a steady state store, right? Because you come as part of like a larger, like you come for a limited time, right? You sort of, either you get the word out through your own marketing, or you come as part of another larger group. So you will tend to see much higher sales in a limited sale or a fair than you would as a steady state store, right? So you'll but I would say that the answer is like you can try any of these methods.
So to this, I have a question which would again apply across categories, which is, imagine you said, because you're supposed to iterate. When you're going international, you don't really know exactly what the customer wants. And you're also educating them on a category. So it takes showing them variety. But now with your inventory, you figured you don't sell at a discount. as a value system, something's not selling, and then there's cost to bring that inventory back to India. Would you take the call of bringing that inventory, or do you bring that inventory back to India, or do you let it stay there and say hopefully it'll find its buyer someday?
So short answer is no, we don't. So what we tend to do is, like I said, we know what is safe, what the brand is known for, right? The brand is known for wedding, high-end, pure silks, Kanjivarams, Banarsi, all of that. But we also do have other varieties. So when I say iterate, what I mean is like, we'll sort of we take a conservative approach, then we're very, very sort of clued in to how that store is performing, how those products are performing, what customers are saying. Sometimes customers will say things like, hey, you've got the right products, but it's too flashy, it's too bright, like I want something sober or I want something lighter. Those are the things that you have to discover in the market, and within 3 to 6 months you'll figure it out. Right? Then you've gotten enough feedback from the market, then you know what sells.
So tell me something, when we look at data of fashion in India, right? Like right now, if you look at what markets are growing in India, right at the top is fashion. Growing at close to 18-20% per annum up till 2030, which is, I believe, the Invest India data to say that out of all industries, this is where we see maximum consumption happening. And there, when you kind of split it further, you look at male versus women's fashion.
Right.
You'll see men's fashion typically takes about 55% of the total share. Women's is about 45%, which when I first read about, I was quite surprised because I thought, oh, women buy more clothes.
Right.
Probably doesn't hold true in my household. I'm just thinking as a business objective, would you think quite like there is making money and there's preserving money? For people who are in this industry, and I wouldn't say just Nalli, for people who are in sarees, where do you see growth levers?
First, see, the saree market just on an absolute basis itself is quite large. From reports, it's around 40 to 50,000 crores, which is a huge market.
Huge market.
The other thing is and this is maybe slightly off topic, but I'll paint a picture, right? There's headwinds and tailwinds. Maybe women, the way I see it, more women used to wear sarees much more frequently, probably 20 years or 30 years ago. We know this, right? But I would say 20, 30 years ago, women wore sarees more out of habit, more out of conformity. Today, I would say women wear it more out of choice. That's one at a very psychological, at a psychographic level. If you even look at it just from a broader sort of business lens, so the number of women who had disposable income, right, that they could spend on their own, the number of women who were actually in the workplace was much less back then, right? So that's also another, that's another sector or a part of that industry that's grown. The size of the middle class, right, today in 2025 compared to what it was in 1995 or in 2005, it is much bigger.
Correct.
So if you look at it, the percentage of women who wear sari on a regular basis, has that gone down? Yes. The short answer is yes, right? But the number of women overall who are able to afford saris, higher end saris, who the share of wardrobe for a woman, like the share of wardrobe that sari occupies, may have come down, but on an absolute level, the number of saris that she buys, how frequently she buys saris, how frequently she changes or upgrades her outfit, that has gone up, right, on an absolute level. So if you look at it from that standpoint, I would say yes, on the one hand, we are seeing the headwinds for this category, but from a volume standpoint, actually there's a lot more tailwinds.
I think this is a
Right.
great insight.
Yeah.
That those who do wear now want a
Yes.
bigger collection.
Yes.
But when customers walk into your store, are salesperson adept enough to be able to immediately looking at someone be able to classify, okay, I can understand their design based on what they're wearing in Western wear or what colors they're wearing? Do you think that has happened?
Yes. So the short answer is yes. So first what the salesperson will do is, let's say it's a new customer. okay, what they do ask budget, because I've seen that is for a lot of people. See, what people want is for 15,000, for 20,000, for 30,000. Show me the best my money can get, right? So they'll come in and then we'll ask them and say, okay, do you have a budget? And if they have, they'll tell you. If they don't have or they don't want to disclose, they won't. Let's say they tell you. So you'll go and say, okay, cool. So you want Kanjivarams and this is your budget. I'll get you a set. So what he'll first do is he'll get you a diverse set, right? He'll get you some contemporary designs. He'll get you some borderless Kanjivarams. He'll get you some classical designs. Now you don't know. For you, it looks very random. But what he's done is he's kind of done a little bit of sampling, right? So he's brought together a kind of an assortment. Then that lady looks at it and says, I like this, I don't want, I like this, I don't want. It sounds very dumb, but what is it that we do on e-commerce today? It's the same thing. Everything that I tap, I sort of check your consumer behavior. It's an indication of interest. Then the algorithm learns and it shows you more of it. Back in the day, this is pretty much what the human was doing. So he sees that, okay, she's gravitating towards pastel. She doesn't like these very big borders. She doesn't like these kind of deep colors. Now he'll go deep into that. Cool. I've gotten an indication of interest. I have a whole set over there. So, and they always tag team, right? So he'll have another person and then he'll tell them and say, listen, this is what she likes, get me more like this. Get from this counter, get from this counter, get from that counter. A little bit up and down on the price point, because sometimes like women, they don't mind, right? But they'll know it when they see it, right? For the very particular customer. So he'll get all of that. And then within that, now she feels like, okay, he's kind of understood what he's gotten
my
it.
taste
right?
is.
Yeah, he's understood my taste. It's nothing but pattern recognition. Ultimately, that person needs to feel that for my specifications, this particular category, this particular price range, maybe I'm adamant that I only want pure Saree, maybe I'm very particular that I only want pure silk. For that, within those constraints, have I seen enough of a mix for me to feel satisfied that, okay, I don't really need to go window shopping. I've had my needs met here, right? So that's typically what it is that they're asking when they come in and they say, okay, show me what's new. It's one statement, right?
Yeah.
But a good salesperson knows how to kind of like pull out these little insights.
Whenever I've been in that situation where anyone from my family is shopping for wedding sarees, I think as men or even as a child, I would feel really guilty for the salesperson. And I would be like, okay, if now someone says we'll go look and come back, you suddenly feel that sense of pity for the person. And I also know that whenever you go saree shopping, because they'll unfurl it and they'll show it, I'm suddenly thinking the guilt of if you don't buy, you've made him go through like 100 sarees worth of effort of unfurling and now folding it and putting it back. So for such a situation, do you train your sales staff, or do they know that this is a part of the thing? Is there like a sales funnel in their head to know that I will have to unfurl these many sarees for these many customers to finally someone buy this much value? Do they get perturbed? Do they feel bad? That's something as a consumer I just want to know.
So, okay, the short answer is a good salesperson should not, because this is the work, right? And in fact, a bit more, see, anything in service of the customer. Do we train them? Yes, it's an apprenticeship based model. So what ends up happening is any new salesperson who comes in, he will shadow a more senior, tenured sort of salesperson. Do that for a week or a couple of weeks. Then under the watchful eye and vigilance of the tenured salesperson, he'll be allowed to attend to customers, right? See, how do you teach someone to be a good salesperson? You genuinely have to like people and you have to like the human connection. So that's from a people standpoint. But I'll tell you another story. So I was 21 and then I saw the salesperson doing something which I got very sort of perturbed by. This lady has come in and she's an old customer, repeat customer. So she comes, speaks to him by name. I said, Muthu sir, what do you have new for me? I have this family function coming up. Takes out everything, shows whatever, and she's very particular. No, I already have this, I already have this color, I already have these things. I am looking for this exact shade, but I don't have this motif. I want hamsa and I want this much. Like she's very, very, very specific in what she wants. So this gentleman speaks to her and then says, you know what? I know exactly what you're looking for. We have a batch coming in, but it won't reach us till Saturday. Can you wait? She said, no, my event is on a Friday or something, she said. He said, just wait here, and told one of the other salesmen, please attend to her. Comes back in with a bag from a competitor, right, with the bag and with everything, and says, listen, the quality in this store is really, really good. I would trust them. They have something. Why don't you see if you like it? If you do, I will go make the sale and I will get it for you. She liked it. He made the sale. Then I asked him and I said, listen, but she came into Nalli and you went and got her a bag from this other place. He said, listen, this customer, she comes to us for any of her needs. Our job is to serve her. Right? Tomorrow she will always come to us. Even if we don't have it, our job is to serve her. And he's right. Time and time again, you look at your really high value, your repeat customers, they behave differently, right? The stickiness is there because of the people factor, because of the trust factor, because they know that, look, first of all, I can trust Nalli, but also because really good salespeople are supposed to go above and beyond. And customer service is one of those very deep things that we are known for and that I think we keep reinforcing.
So what is your process of innovation? And when I ask that question, I'll tell you, when I speak with other entrepreneurs in fashion, they very closely follow what is trending in the US, what is trending in Korea, Korean and Japanese fashion. And then they'll say, okay, there's a lot of muted colors which are working internationally, so we should bring that.
Right.
And there is a uniformication, I know that's not a word, but a standardization of design globally, where there are reports of, say, like a WGSN, But I would think for sarees, it's not something you can deconstruct from a WGSN because it's very India-centric.
Yes.
So how do you innovate? Is it from a supply perspective that a weaver decides, okay, I'm going to do this pitch-wide design on a saree? Or is it very consumer specific where you're trying to, because the consumer wouldn't know what they want.
Right.
They'll just say something new. So how does it work in your business?
So there are two questions that I'll answer in that. See, how do we innovate? That has to be a continuous process. Because if you don't and you just keep perfecting what you've done, I mean, to me, that's stagnation. Right? As a business owner, you can't.
Correct.
Right? Like you can't be a 100-year-old business doing like, oh, 100 years ago, this used to sell, so let's perfect it. Right? Like you have to go with the industry keeps changing, the consumer keeps changing, and as they keep evolving, you have to evolve with them. But the sort of underlying question which I'm pulling out is, how do you also stay on top of fads, right?
Yeah.
WGSN is slightly different, I'll tell you why, because my view is the Western fashion world is also very structured, right? The pool from which everything draws from, right? Like there are the movers and shakers, then there are like the fashion weeks, and then there are, like the runways, and then everyone sort of like, there's almost this very linear way, like it originates from a place and then there's a whole ecosystem built around it. In a disorganized, still it is disorganized, and a highly sort of decentralized ecosystem like India when it comes to ethnic wear, there isn't any origin point, right? So sometimes you have these little bubbles that come up. Now there is a bit of some fads come from Bollywood, right? Someone wears a saree, that show becomes a hit, right? Suddenly everyone wants it, right? And then it's trending, right? Everybody wants that Rocky or Ronnie saree. Everyone wants this, and then they'll call it that color. They'll call it the Alia Bhatt color. It's not.
But so that means your team is also looking at Instagram and being like, okay, this is really trending, or it's like suddenly you see bunch of people coming and asking for it, and you're like, just
Instagram,
get it done.
Interestingly, Instagram is a very, very, very small portion, right? You do catch trends on Instagram, but the bigger trends is consumers will come in and they'll say, I want that. What she wore, I want something like that. So these are all the different ways in which you figure out.
So, okay, so the process around it is, say, for example, someone comes to a salesperson in some store in Bombay.
Right.
Shows a picture. Do you have this? Now, if the salesperson absolutely knows we don't have this, where do they take that information? Do they take it to the store manager, or do they call up like a merchandiser? What do they do so that at the head office you're suddenly hearing the voices of different stores?
Right. So every company has a different process. Ours is, like I said, ours is a very apprenticeship based, very people oriented business, right? A good sales head, I mean, a good store manager will know exactly what's going on, and he'll know the pulse of the consumer because he's walking the floor. Right? He knows what's happening in this store, he knows what's happening in his branch stores, and this information comes all the way from the bottom, right? So what's trending, what's selling? See, there are two ways. One is hard data. I load my shelf with this and I see that systematically my pinks are selling out at 2 times the speed as my blues. Then the other is things that you don't see. See, how can I sell something that's not there? But a salesperson will come and say, listen, more and more customers are saying this kind of motive is not, this big buttas they're tired of now. They keep asking and say, do you have like this, right? Do you have these kinds of, do you have the small motifs, or do you have like, I want tone on tone, or I want like, big borders are back in fashion. So the stuff that consumers ask saying, I see what's on your shelf, but do you have this? That salesperson will directly go and tell the store head, right? Store heads will tell the VP. The VP is the one who does the merchandising. He needs to know, look, please make sure you get this, because as soon as it comes in, it's selling out. You're seeing the speed at which it's going. Two, even the products that you're getting in is not enough, because the salespeople keep saying customers want to see more variety in it. They want to see more options in this, right? This particular sort of fad has really taken off. So it is a mix of both data as well as what you're hearing from the ground.
Got it.
I would say, like, for stores, it's not just stores. If you're in retail, if you're working ultimately with the end consumer, you have to know and find some space way to get unstructured information and flow that back up. Who really needs this information with speed? The person who's making the buys. We don't have a centralized buying unit, right?
Okay.
So everything is decentralized. The regional VPs run it.
Because they know the regional tastes are different. So the regional VP's responsibility is whatever is selling here, it's your job to just let us know and procure.
Absolutely. The other reason is also because Nalli has a very strict no discounting rule. So right now we tell them, no, you don't get anything.
Yeah. So I would just wonder, how is it that you go to a store which serves you something worth lakhs and worth 800 rupees also? And that's possibly because when you are asking a customer for a price, they know you're not changing the price for them. Whatever is there, so at least that comfort is there for them to be able to state their budget.
Yes, and while the product may be a high value product, see, there is an inherent cost of silk. There is an inherent sort of labor cost, right? You can't go below a certain amount. If you've woven like pure zari into it, there's an inherent value of gold. If you want that look, but you want it at a lower cost, you have to make a compromise somewhere. Either you'll do a blended silk, or you'll do a lower quality, like you'll do a half fine zari. But we disclose all of that. What we make as a promise to the consumer is, look, with Nalli, you can rest assured that our margins are very thin. And I'll tell you why the margins matter. See, you can only do discounts if you have enough of a margin. If I have a 50% margin, or whatever it is, 40%, 60%, whatever that thing is, then I know that my effective margin can be, if I'll set a 50% margin, effective margin is 40%, which means that I can run discounts every time I need to sort of like hit my numbers. Here we say, no, that's like we're taking that away. It's a very powerful lever. So we're taking away that pricing lever. We're forcing you to have a very low margin on a very high quality goods. See, then we have to allow the VP to have some flexibility somewhere.
Correct.
If you do all of that and then you do centralized buying, I mean, then you've sort of like got this guy trapped. So we tell him and say, look, you run a tight ship, run for full price sell-through, run for high inventory turnover, no discounts. So, and then again, it's very Darwinian. So then a really good VP has to really run a very tight ship, right, for him to run a successful business.
So what I'm hearing when I hear low margins is, I would assume something like net profit margins, mean close to 4-5% is what I would think a low margin business would be. Okay, that's the assumption I would come for. And one principle of business one would see is, when it's a low margin business, your inventory turnover is the game.
Yes, absolutely.
And you have to keep spinning with high velocity, and only then can you really maximize the return on invested capital.
Yes. When I was saying margin, actually what I was talking about is gross margin. A gross margin is actually really low. But
gross margin of
trickle down.
What should it be? I would think typically for fashion is what we see is if it costs you to make it for 20, you price it at 100, so that even after discounts, you have like a good enough margin and sizing,
so
and something
sells doesn't sell. I know that the larger players do. You're right, and so I won't disclose it, but what I would say is like, take a product from Nalli, figure out what the specs are. Is it pure Saree? Is it silk? Is it da-da-da? Go to a weaver and then identify a similar thing. You would be hard pressed to find, like sometimes even from a weaver, you can't get a better rate, right? And that's because we just do such volumes that we're able to negotiate with them.
Correct.
See, what we always do is, and I call it like the vacation principle. If someone wants to go on a vacation, they'll come to you and they'll say, my budget is 3 lakhs. Get me something really amazing for 3 lakhs. They don't want to hear, oh, your budget is only 3 lakhs. Okay, then for 3 lakhs, let me give you, like they don't want to feel like I'm compromising, right? They want to say the budget is the ceiling. Don't show me, okay, for 2 lakhs, why don't you go to like, Coorg, or you go to someplace local. They want to say, look, I don't mind you hit 3 lakhs, but I want bang for buck. And so we sort of take that philosophy and we say, look, what is the best value that I can get for my consumer? And it comes from a very deep psyche, which is almost a family philosophy, not even a business philosophy. Our goal is every woman in India, whatever her budget, should be able to get the best product that our country is capable of producing, right, for her money. That's it. So we don't do a high margin game. We don't do designer label sort of we don't do that. And we don't, which means that if you have very low gross margins, you don't really have much to spend on marketing and a lot of these other things. But those who know. And I think like your core customers, people who really love their sarees and who have the ability and willingness to pay for such a high value goods, tend to be very high repeats with us.
Correct. Okay, so now on the inventory turnover. Typically when you make a store and they have to show so much range to the customer, how frequently should your inventory be churning? Or for how many months worth of sales do you think you will have to stock so that the customer doesn't feel like they've not seen enough? Because a lot of times if you keep little, they might then just go to some other place just to see a variety.
Right.
So what's that sweet spot for you?
Broadly, like if you just said now a wedding saree, right, which innately will have a certain, like will tend to be pure silk, like always pure silk, maybe pure zari. But if you have pure zari, which is basically the content of gold, automatically the price goes up exponentially, right? Just because of the gold content and the price of gold. Those sarees, you can't expect it to turn over every 30 days. Like you'll probably need to have maybe 3 months worth, right? Like which means that like the average time to sell is roughly around like 90 days or 120 days or something like that.
For a wedding gold saree?
Yes, something which is say 60,000 rupee or a 1 lakh saree.
Okay.
Right?
So you're saying that's kind of like what I'm hearing is that's the upper limit of what you would let a saree stay on your shelves for. Is about 3 to 6 months.
Not 6.
Not 6 for sure.
Not 6.
3 months is the upper limit.
Yeah, 3 to 4 months.
Okay.
Right on average. But like I said, see, we have like pure gold woven with gold tissue sarees. We sold 3 of them literally 3 days ago at our Chennai store, Nalli Fashions. Each saree was 5 lakh, right?
Wow.
So, but it's gold by gold, right? That's a tissue. So, that saree is, see, you can't not have that saree. Right. Now, if you put a very strict rule to say that, listen, every saree, the upper limit is 3 months, 4 months, then you won't end up having sarees like that. So, little bit of that we kind of like flex with. But the philosophy, what I'm saying is, you'll know that there are certain considered purchases because of the price, because of the occasion that brings these people into the store, and because this customer comes to your store for this need, and you will lose the customer if you don't have an assortment breadth, right, and a variety. That assortment sets the stage, right? It's less about whole 3 months worth of inventory. It's more about you have to understand what is that optimum assortment that you need to hold for that customer to feel satisfied. So there's that, right? Now, if your entire inventory is that, then you're going to go into then you'll need to fund your working capital.
Correct.
Luckily, you'll also have, like we spoke, the sarees that sell for 800 rupees, right? The sarees that sell for 1,000 rupees. Now, those sarees you really need to keep 30 days worth of stock. Can you do with 10 days worth of stock? How many do you sell in a day, right? Now, if your rate of sales is really high, the question is, then it's an operational question. All right, your rate of sales is so high. How frequently do you do your inwarding? Right?
Correct.
We do our inwards every day. During Diwali, we sometimes do it 2 times a day in a store, right? So, which means that when I say just in time, I'm literally meaning just in time, right? Like we're replenishing it the rate at which it's sort of selling out. We don't have a buffer, we don't have a warehouse. Now, that may or may not be the right strategy for us. And like I said, it sort of differs a bit store to store. But because we follow the hub and spoke model, it's fine, right? Like your branch stores, your feeder store will sort of will have a slightly larger area within the store premises. Like you'll have a go down or you'll have a basement where you will have your excess stock. Technically, it's not excess stock. That's the processing area, right? Because the rate at which you're doing sales is the rate at which you're having sort of inwards coming in, and maybe you have a little buffer zone over there, but that's it. You don't really have a warehouse. So if you look at it that way, on average, you want to run your store in such a way that if you do it really, really well, you have a positive sort of working capital, which means that the average time to sell an average saree in your store is faster than the time for you to pay the vendor. So if you run it that way, then the strain on the business becomes much less.
Correct. What I'm really surprised by is I was speaking with a founder who manufactures shoes, and they do for all major brands that sell in India. And they said a store would have to keep about, or we would have to keep about 5 months of inventory. And I was like, that's crazy. So he said that's because the lead time for manufacture and to bring them, and the fact that there is a sizing matter in shoes.
Yes. That complicates a lot of things.
So you don't have a sizing issue.
We don't have a sizing issue.
So that has simplified it, and it enables you to keep a lot more designs. So you would say, maybe if you were to blend it across designs, across stores, at a corporate level, of 45 to 60 days worth of inventory is what you would say is we're running at, say, good optimal capacity. Would that be your benchmark?
Yeah, but see, the averages can mask a number, right? Like you really, like I said, if you put an average, even if I were to tell you, hey, listen, don't hold more than 3 months worth of inventory when it comes to your wedding sarees, but that may not give you enough variety to keep that customer satisfied. So you really have to think about at a very granular level, what
store
is
by
the
store.
Yeah, first, actually even deeper than that, at a subcategory level, category by category, then store by store, so that you say that, okay, look, I have certain categories where I'm sorry, but I need to hold this range. I need to hold this assortment. But if I have to hold a minimum assortment of this, right? And now we only spoke about Kanjivaram and Banarsi, which are wedding sarees at a certain price point. At the same price point, there are some very beautiful regional weaves, but they don't have that level of popularity and therefore not that level of inventory turnover. And yet you can't walk into a Nalli store and not find a decent range within ikats, within, bandhanis, within uppadas, like customers expect it, right? So because the customer expects it, and because that's the reason why they come to the store, now sometimes you're sort of handicapped. But then how are you going to fund like 3 months worth of stock here? Maybe you're only holding 10 days worth of stock in some other category,
Correct.
But then you're sort of turning that over
Absolutely.
really quickly.
Correct.
Right? And so that's sort of unlocking a little capital for you. So a really good store head should be able to figure these things out. But the short answer is, it's effortful.
Yeah.
It's effortful, and I feel like we shouldn't shy away from it.
You know what's best about this conversation is that almost always when I have these conversations with founders and entrepreneurs, it's so margin centric, and so everything is about, the consumer, we figured this need and there was an opportunity and a white space and we went right after it. And I think what you remind me is the core value of business, saying we'll keep, your ethos about customer should get the best product at this price and that will only be at Nalli, or we will try and make it happen for the customer. And this reminds me of Jim Collins, and his long-term philosophy of just build for the long term, just being absolutely obsessed with the customer's need and serving it. And even things which in the short term may seem like this is not making sense, over the long term, that'll just help you stay the course. And I think legacies are built not over spreadsheets and short-term opportunities, but just brand ethos. And I think I would hope a lot more brands today take that from you. And thank you so much, Lavanya. I think fabulous conversation. We all thoroughly enjoyed. I did as a man, just learning about sarees. I think that's awesome. I'll be a lot more empathetic towards women in my family when they go shopping for sarees. Thank you. It takes so much work to build a business, and I hope there could be one formula that everyone could just replicate. But my purpose here is to keep bringing you more stories from businesses that have expanded globally, and each learning slowly applied would help you expand to the world. This is Founder's Office with Sarthak Ahuja.